Welcome to another 21 Hats Dashboard. I'm Loren Feldman. I'm here with Gene Marks to talk about the things we think business owners should be following this week. Welcome, Gene.
Hello, Loren.
Great to have you here. As usual, you've been writing about all kinds of stuff that matters to business owners. But this week, I want to start with something you didn't write. It's a Twitter thread I highlighted last week in the Morning Report. And it was written by someone named Rich Webster, who pointed out the dangers of charging by the hour, which a lot of people do. The problem is you kind of end up punishing yourself for doing your job well. The faster you do it, kind of the less you get paid. You're a consultant. I thought you might have some thoughts about this.
I do. This has been an issue that goes back to the time of Jesus. Do you charge by the hour?
You're not that old, Gene.
And I'm not a religious guy, but do you charge by the hour or do you charge like by project,
And by expertise.
Yeah, and by expertise. And people, for years I've grappled with this. And there was a time, Loren, when I started back in the day, I was selling this product called Goldmine Software, which is still around. Your older listeners might recognize it. And there was the company that was selling it was trying to build a whole consultative approach to their contact management and CRM projects and trying to get people like me to to make more money. So we would sell more of their software. We should sell it based on projects. Like don't charge by the hour. You degrade your value by doing that, And I get it, and I get it, and I get it, and yet it all comes down to by the hour. People always are like, what's the, charge by the value of the project. If you're going to sell something, that's going to make them $10,000, then you should charge $5,000, even if you're only spending an hour on that. That was the basis of it,
Right. Because you have this expertise that you've acquired over years and, you might be able to do it quickly, but that's only because you have that expertise.
It never flies, dude. It never flies because any smart business, I sell B2B. So any business person is like, I know this is only going to take you an hour. There was no fucking way I'm going to pay you $5,000 for an hour's worth of work. Do you know what I mean? Like and you know what the proof is in the pudding? And I'll tell you, would you agree that the partners at the world's largest law firms?
I was going to say that.
People, yeah.
It's working fairly well for lawyers.
Yeah. They're pretty smart people to be, in that profession alone, let alone at the highest levels. And they're charging by the hour. They've all tried. Same thing with the big four accountants. You don't think that they want to charge by project. These are like the greatest, the best minds in the profession, theoretically. And they can't figure it out. They can't do project based. It's nice. It sounds nice, but there's just reality.
Have you actually tried it, Gene?
You know what? I've tried it and failed. I've never been, what it is? I've never been able to sell it because it's not, when I sell something, it's got to make sense to both me and my customer. Do you know what I mean?
I'm tempted to think it would make sense to some customers because you want to know what it's going to cost. If you're paying by the hour, especially if it's a lawyer, you have no idea how high that bill could go. If there's a project cost, it's defined. Well,
that's the thing. So number one is defining the value of that cost is a hard sell. So that's number one. Number two is, it's a matter of, do you charge by the hour or do you just have like a fixed price contract type of thing, like a project fee? And I've always shied away from projects that way, because then I start taking the liability and the risk on my own.
Right.
Like we've had some clients, not irregularly, say to us, like, we don't want to pay by the hour because we don't just give us a cost. What's this project going to cost? And I shy away from that stuff. If I'm asked to do that, I will bump up my estimate 30%. And it's not based on value. It's like just based on a reserve, a cushion in case we go over the amount of hours that are going to be spent on that project. Do you know what I mean? So to me, like the most honest way of billing, of doing a project is by billing by your honest day's work or the hours that you spend. And if you want to make your money and you want to say that you're so valuable, then you charge a higher rate. And that's why people at large law firms that have been practicing law for 30 years can charge a couple grand an hour, because they're like, all right, that's my value. You know what I mean? It's built into my hourly rate. And I think that's what makes the most sense.
I hear you, and I suspect that's why lots of people do exactly what you just described.
Yeah, it's hard. And it's always a continuing issue. It'll never end. But I'm just telling you from 20, I've tried for 20 years to do this and failed to do like project based or, consultative based billing. It's always an hourly thing.
It does seem like a good idea. I'd love to hear from anybody out there who has done it successfully. If you
Yeah.
want to shoot me an email with your experience, I'd love to hear those examples.
I will tell you one thing before we end that, on this topic. A good example is, I do a lot of speaking, like about 50 times a year. I speak to associations and I have a fee for that. And I base that fee kind of based on the audience. If I'm speaking to a small group, I know what their budget's going to be versus if I'm speaking at a large conference, so
Sure.
it's a higher fee if I'm speaking to 1,000 people versus if I'm speaking to, 30 people.
Sure.
But it's the same hour. Do you know what I mean? So it's not an hourly thing. There's an example of like, that's just a fee. That's like
Well,
a
do you
value.
consider travel if you have to go across the country?
Yeah, I do. So it's funny that you say that because when people ask me like, oh, well then, can Gene speak on Tuesday and Wednesday? My fee goes up and my rationale is saying, well, now you're asking me to spend 2 days of my time. So now it gets back down to an hourly type of calculation. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So it all comes down to the amount of time that you're putting in.
Interesting. All right, next topic. You did write last week about hiring ex-offenders, something that you feel you believe in and is a good idea, but you have one concern. Tell us your concern.
Well, this concern came out of Lauren, what my wife does. I think you met Angela once or twice. And
Yes.
so she runs a nonprofit outside of Philly or in Philly, and it's called Reading Aloud. Guys, shameless plug, readingaloud.org. And what she does is she provides a structured literacy tutoring to kids that can't afford it. So, you have all these kids that are so far behind in reading, and the pandemic made it so much worse. And if your kids go to private school, or if you grow up in a nice neighborhood, your parents can afford to hire a certified instructor to teach them how to read. But if you're not, then you're kind of shit out of luck. And her organization has gotten a ton of, raised a bunch of money from different sources and pays for these certified tutors to go out and teach these kids how to read. It's really, really good. And they've got like a few hundred kids and like 50 or 60 tutors, and it's all that's great stuff. But her whole thing is like a social justice thing. It's a thing about crime because, when you look at people that are in prison, there is like these enormous, like 70% of the prisoners read at like a 4th grade level. They never got the education, and because they never got the education, they can't get ahead in this world, and they get frustrated and they steal or commit crimes and they wind up going to jail. So it gets back to like, what about hiring people out of prison? There's all these different programs out there, and government tax credits, the work opportunity tax credit, the status tax credits, trying to encourage employers to hire felons to work for them. And I would love to hire. I have no problem hiring an ex-felon. I mean, I'm a believer in, you commit your crime, you do your time, you pay your penance, and if you're coming back into society, fair enough. I think you should be hired. But the problem is that they're just not prepared to enter the workforce. They're not only do they not have skills, but the biggest skill is what they're missing, which is reading. They are still, ex-felons are not coming back into the workforce with ability to read even at a high school level. And we're talking about 70 to 80% of them. And as an employer, I'm like, listen, you can give me all the tax credits in the world. I can't teach this guy how to read, even if they're operating a machine, they have to learn to do a manual or fill out a time card or do, you got to learn how to read to do a job. I mean, it's just what you have to do, particularly in my company where we're doing technical stuff, and that's a big problem to me. And so I'm like, don't stop giving us the tax credits. Take that same money that's costing for all these tax credits and funnel it into literacy programs in prisons. To me, that's what the answer is.
That's an interesting point because especially at a time of a labor shortage, you probably don't need the tax credit to give employers the incentive. You just need to give them people who are qualified to do the work.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, if I knew that people were graduating from prison, like knowing how to, that had skills and again, I know it's skills, but it all starts with reading. If the government paid for that, and they sent tutors to prisons or had training programs to teach them those basics, I think employers would be hiring ex-felons regardless of tax credits or not. It's just the money's misspent, and that's why I wouldn't hire an ex-felon. That's the reason why.
Interesting point. All right, last topic. And Gene, this is the moment you've been waiting for. Your
Here we
weekly
go.
opportunity to slander employees. You wrote a piece last week in which you said remote workers are stealing from their employers. Want to explain?
All right. First of all, tongue in cheek. Everybody calm down. Everybody calm
Not
down.
completely tongue in cheek, Gene.
Well, not completely. So, you know that I always like to. I feel, Lauren, that as you know, most employers really can't publicly complain about their employees. First of all, most employers love their employees, but they can't complain about when people take advantage in the workforce because it's just not good PR. So I feel it's my duty to bring these.
You're providing that service.
Yes, I'm providing this service. Thank you. You're welcome, everyone. And
Should we pay you by the hour?
Here's another part of that service. So I stumbled on new research that was published recently from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. They spent all of 2021 doing time studies, analysis, and surveys of workers working from home and working in the office. And Lauren, guess what they found? The Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this is the government, okay? We
know they never get it wrong.
Well, okay, right. But they found that on average, employees working from home worked on average 5.5 hours a day. And they found in comparison, on average, that workers working in the office are working 7.5 hours a day. This is all exclusive of commuting time, which is a 40% difference. Their conclusion was workers. Now, by the way, there are plenty of workers out there that work their asses off and work, many hours at home. But on average, the Bureau of Labor Statistics is basically saying to employers, if you're going to send your employees home to work, they're going to work 40% less. Now, are those employees giving 40% of their paychecks back to their employers? Because they're doing.
All right, wait. Before we get there, I gotta admit.
Go ahead. Here we go.
I'm a little skeptical of those numbers. I've worked in offices. The idea that everybody's working, 7.5 or whatever hours out of the day, I don't know about that. I mean, maybe in some offices, but if it's an 8-hour day, that's a very high percentage going into actual work. Do you know how they calculated this?
You know what, Lauren? I'm still looking into the methodology. I was so giddy with excitement over the actual results that I really didn't bother to look.
You don't want anything to blow this up for you. I understand.
I didn't bother to look at how they came up with them, but the workers themselves. You're right in the office. The theory is that if you're in the office,
there are ways to waste time in an office.
There are certainly plenty of ways, but then on the other hand, it is an average. And then also there is also, when you're around other people, if you're in the coffee room, you're still maybe chatting about TV shows, but you could also be chatting about customers and clients as well. There's the collaborations being done. It all kind of considers to be work. Maybe it's not a 40% difference, but that's a pretty significant number. And I guess, the takeaway to me is that if you're going to let your employees work from home, which I think is an essential benefit,
which you've been doing for a long time.
Yeah, we're all virtual, but if you're at a company, and I know a lot of clients are struggling with their work from home because they want to look, Snap just said last week they're requiring their employees to come into the office. Obviously, we know what Elon Musk at Twitter is saying. Jamie Dimon, there's a lot of people out there, at Chase is saying, we require people to come into the office. It's a real contentious point. Just know that if you're going to have a work from home policy and let people work from home, they're probably going to work less. I mean, that's what the numbers are showing. So how do you account for that? Like, what do you do? Do you pay them less? Do you give them less benefits? Does it figure into their PTO plan? It's an issue.
Well, I've asked quite a few business owners about this, and most of them have responded to me along these lines. If they do the job, that's all I care about. If they can do it quicker and spend less time on it, more power to them. I just want to know that the job is getting done.
That is fine, and I actually agree with that point of view. Does the employee who has to come into work every day because they're manning a machine or they have to be in the office, do they feel that that's equitable? That's another point of contention. Do you know what I mean? So it's an issue.
I will say, yeah, I've worked at home a good bit, and I know a lot of people who have. A lot of people struggle with something that I've definitely struggled with, which is there's no natural endpoint to the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I've actually worked way more hours when I've been working at home. When I've been in the office, I've always had a train to catch or something, or some reason to get out the door. At home, you don't have that natural break. It's easy to just lose track of time and keep going.
Yeah. Do you miss working in the office? Do you miss going to the New York Times?
I Yes and no. There are certainly aspects of it that I missed. I do not miss commuting, and that just, that outweighs everything.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. The commuting thing is it's a big deal. Look, listen, there's mental health, there's free time, there's balance in your life, there's more time with your family. There's a lot of benefits you get from working from home, but they do come as a cost to the employer.
Did this change your thinking? You've had people working remotely for a long time. Did you read this? Did you feel the need to take any action?
Not at all. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, I'm not changing anything with the structure of my company. Do I?
Because you believe your employees are getting the job done?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I've always had that attitude since 2005 when we went total virtual. It's just, listen, you've got your clients to take care of. And as long as I'm not hearing any headaches, I don't really give a shit when you're working or how many times you're working.
There you go.
What I mean? So do your thing. So, I guess that you're right. That does have to be the attitude of the employer. It's just a mindset, because that you have to accept the fact that less time is being spent. You know what I think, like the telling data is that, I think we've talked about this before. There's been like something like 15 million new startup applications filed in the past 3 years.
Yep.
And I think that it's because of this. I think there's a lot of work from home workers starting up side gigs on their employer's time. That's what I think.
Well, a lot of that happened during the throes of the pandemic and the lockdown, and people were losing jobs. And, I think a lot of that was people who were forced to try to find something else. You're describing people who are taking advantage of an opportunity to work more than one job at once, which we know has happened. There have been stories out of Silicon Valley of, tech people working for 3 different employers at once.
Yeah. And I guess, that's the whole point. I mean, I like to take the extreme point of view and be like, remote workers are stealing from their employers, and some are. And I think that it is I think it's something that employers need to be aware of when they're coming up with their work from home policies. Like, this is, their people are working less when they're working from home on average. And that's just seems to be what
I still want to know how they did that study. I'm not sure I'm convinced about it, but
I'm just following the science. I'm all about the science, and I'm just following the science.
What are you working on, Gene? Anything we should look for in the coming week?
Yeah, I'm going to write I'm writing a piece for the Chicago Daily Herald. What? Who's that?
You mentioned them last week.
I did. Yes, I'm going to start writing for those guys. I like those guys. So I'm going to start, a little bit on them. And then I'm up in the air what I'm going to write about for the Inquirer next week. I've got, I talked to a lot of people. Maybe you can help me with this decision about producing the right kind of videos for your business. Some tips on that, because I talked to some video people about that. I talked to some people. I got some really cool tips for using Office 365 that you probably don't know. And then I also talked to a few people about deferred compensation plans, Loren, and why they're a really cool tax strategy that will help you entice higher paid workers, but save you a little bit of money and them money over time. What do you think is most interesting?
I think they all sound interesting. I think the one that if you've got a lot of people struggle with the video thing.
Yeah,
and I think a lot of people know that's something they should be paying more attention to, and they don't know how to get started with it. If you can be helpful with that, I think that would be of value to a lot of people.
God damn it, Loren. That's what I'm going to do.
All right.
I'm going to write about video. That's exactly. I've got like 2 or 3 interviews, and they taught me a lot about doing videos, for your business,
and marketing purposes.
Yeah, and things like, lighting, there's some recommendations of microphones, how to behave when you're in front of a camera, that kind of thing for marketing purposes. And just some technical advice that you would get from video producers. That's what I'm going to do.
And where to hire that talent? Can you, if somebody's just exploring this and they don't want to spend a ton of money for, a really big outfit, how do they find somebody who can help them affordably?
that's kind of be my takeaway, is that you get what you pay for. And if you hire an outside video firm, because there are a lot of good ones out there, if you find the right one, they're going to cost, but the quality is just, you can't even compare it to do it on your own, period.
But then you have to know for sure what you're doing it for and what value you expect to get out of it before you spend that kind of money. It's tricky.
That's right. That's right. You want to write this? If you want, I can send you my notes.
I'll edit it. Send it to me.
You can edit it. That's right. You do a great job at that, actually.
Gene Marks is a CPA who writes weekly on small business for The Guardian, The Hill, The Philadelphia Inquirer, The Washington Times, Forbes, Entrepreneur, and the Chicago Daily Herald.
Chicago Daily Herald, Lord.
You can also hear him on ABC Radio's Eye on the World with John Batchelor. Gene hosts 2 small business podcasts with Paychex Corporation and The Hartford. Thank you, Gene.
Thanks, Lauren. See you next week.
Have a great week, everyone.